Yeah, what's the incentive to recruit more into the powers of darkness?
Okay. So yeah, and that basically maybe that's an indication that God does have some sort of vulnerability that they know about, and that's why they're recruiting human beings. Okay. Um, I think that the I think that the answer to that question is that in Scripture what you see is that the forces of darkness understand that they have been defeated, and that their defeat was accomplished at the sacrifice of Christ. So when Christ died, this is painted. This picture is painted so beautifully in the book The Unseen Realm. But to sort of summarize, the forces of darkness, Scripture talks about false gods, right? And small g gods. And it's sort of gods are kind of a class of being, if you will. Like you have angels like cherubim, seraphim, and gods, small g. And Scripture talks about a divine council, mentions that God sits in his council and makes judgment. And the picture, I'm going to just vastly paraphrase and just tell the story, right? So without citing a lot of things, it's just going to be the story. So the story is that God rules from his divine council. And there are these small g gods that are divine beings. Divine not in the sense that they're part of God, the Most High. But Scripture always makes that distinction. It talks about the sons of God, the gods, small g, but then there is the Most High God, capital G, Yahweh, that is eternally existent in three persons, the Trinity. All right, so two different concepts. The Most High God is uncreated, the source and ground of all being, the I am. There's no, he's just the I am, self-referential, self-existent, and as such beyond our understanding, right? Because that we can't really comprehend that. We can describe it, but can't comprehend it. Well, these small g gods, there are some of them that rebelled against God, and Christ. Wow, it's such a big story. They rebel against God, set themselves up to be worshipped on earth by the peoples of the world. And this is where the concept of a false god comes from. It's not false in the sense that like, oh, that's a fake god that mankind invented. It's a false god in the sense that it's a real god pretending to be the God, right? So there's the worship of false gods that is throughout the Old Testament, right? So that's sort of the world of the Old Testament, is that there are these false gods that have propped themselves up as objects of worship for humanity, and they've led humanity astray into all kinds of wicked directions. And it is in that context, or that landscape, that God chooses Abraham. And he's like, basically the whole earth is corrupted and being ruled by these false gods, and God is saying, humanity is mine. I created humanity, and I'm going to have relationship with them. He calls Abraham out and says, I'm going to make a nation out of you. I'm going to make a new nation that has not existed up until this point, that's going to be devoted to me. And in the landscape of these false gods demanding worship from all the nations of the world, God inserts himself into the fray, so to speak, and calls out Abraham, makes a nation of him, Um, by the time that Christ comes on the scene, there have been all of these prophets that have been sent to the nation of Israel to call them toward their relationship with the true God. And there is so Christ comes and he is his things about him have been prophesied for centuries, but it's been there have been almost, when you read the Old Testament, you could if you were to read it from the perspective of somebody that lived before Christ came, you would see seemingly contradictory prophecies. You would see prophecies about this suffering servant figure that is very, very humble and all of this, very unassuming. And then you would see prophecies of a king, and it's like, okay, well, it's almost like, which one is coming? Is it going to be the servant or is it going to be a king? You know, how do you reconcile these pictures that are being presented? So this was intentionally done. God was revealing the truth about Jesus who would come, but he was revealing it in such a way that it wasn't clear to the forces of darkness exactly the mission that he was here to accomplish. So in a spiritual warfare with earth as the main battleground, Jesus is being sent into the world, and the forces of darkness know that this is happening. And so what is their response? It's like, oh, he's coming to take this back, right? He's going to come to proclaim himself the King of Israel, this nation that God has made for himself. He's going to come and proclaim himself king, and he's going to rule over his nation the way that we have ruled over our nations. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's the presupposition from them would be something along those lines, that whereas the forces of darkness had violated the boundary between heaven and earth, and come in a physical form, taken wives, propagated themselves, procreated with women, and then set themselves up as these gods of the nations to be worshipped. That's sort of like, okay, well, God is sending the Son of God, and it's interesting. Those little g gods are called sons of God, but then there's the Son of God, and in Scripture he's called like the only begotten Son of God, and the terminology in Greek it may be something more like the one and only Son of God. So there are the sons of God, and then there's this one and only Son that's distinct from all the others, and he's distinct because he is part of the Trinity, right? So the one and only Son of God is coming to earth. And so how does that make all the other sons of God feel? Well, they're going to be a little on edge. They're going to be waiting to figure out how to defeat him coming and taking over, right? So you have the story of the virgin birth. You have King Herod declaring, okay, all of the sons born in this geographic region are going to be killed. Anyone under 2 years old is going to be killed, because they're trying to what? Trying to kill Christ, the Son of God, as soon as he comes into the world. They're just waiting to eliminate him immediately. That doesn't work. Christ is born. Christ lives his life. And there's this episode with Christ and his disciples where they are, I believe it's on the same mountain or next to the same mountain where it is purported that the sons of God came to earth, right? And so he's within a stone's throw of this area that was referred to as the gates of hell, because it was referred to as a portal in that Second Temple period of Jewish history. The Jews in that area knew that place by this name, the gates of hell, because it was associated with being a portal between dimensions, between our world and the spiritual world. And Christ is talking to his disciples, and it's that a very famous episode where he turns to Peter and he says, I will build my church. Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. He's sort of like, you can like imagine him like pointing over there and being like, the gates of hell will not prevail against it. He's using spiritual warfare terminology, and he is like, it is a shot across their bow that he's at their place. This is a place that's like, for lack of a better term, sacred to them, because this is where they transgress that boundary between heaven and earth. And he's saying, for all of the power that represents, you guys coming to earth, doing what you shouldn't have been doing, setting yourselves up as gods to be worshipped, that's not going to prevail against what I'm going to build. And again, they're thinking, he's here to set up his kingdom, right? He's here to take back the earth. So what is their mission? How do they respond? Well, they respond by crucifying Jesus. The forces of darkness, and you can look at it in detail when you read about the Pharisees and Christ on trial and all of that. But he's basically daring them to do something. And it's like he is, Christ knows that his mission is not to come up and set up an earthly kingdom. He actually says to Pilate that if my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would fight. But my kingdom is not of this world. So there are these little like glimpses of things, but it's like, well, what does that mean? You know, and the forces of darkness, despite the fact that he made that statement, they still put him on a cross and killed him. But that was the point. Him being killed wasn't defeat, it was victory. And the mechanism by which that was true is that Christ's mission wasn't to set up an earthly kingdom where he would then rule over sinful humanity. His mission was to come and provide a way to make sinful humanity righteous.
Right, but that is dependent, right, upon people believing in Jesus and believing in that. So the forces of darkness that are still around today succeed in that every single human being doesn't believe in it.
Right. So
then what happens?
That's right. So this is finally getting around to answering your question.
Right.
So what is their play? Like Jesus, his goal was to come and provide the way of salvation. But God is fully aware not every person is going to believe. He knows all the ones that are going to believe. And as soon as all of those who are going to believe are saved, are rescued, are redeemed, then their time, the forces of darkness, their time is up, because that is when Christ returns to judge, and that's when he judges them as well. So there is there's this, what I believe is their strategy is this. They're trying to keep time on the clock. You know what I mean? It's like, it's when there's 3 minutes to go and your team, Kansas City is down, Patrick Mahomes goes out on the field. He's got 2 timeouts and he's got the 2-minute warning, and he's going to stretch that 3 minutes, and it's going to like, actual watch time is going to be like 25 minutes, right? Because it's going to take that long for him to drive down the field and he's going to score and win the game.
Right.
That's what they're doing is not trying. There's no method by which they can score and win the game. but they want to extend the game for as long as possible, because until the longer they can keep people from believing, and the more people that they can keep from believing, first of all, then the more people are condemned, and that's them winning, in a sense, battles, individual battles, because this is a creation of God made in his image that he is not going to have a relationship with.
So you're making the argument, and I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here. You're making the argument, it's almost like how you were describing narcissism earlier, where it's like, basically, if you can't have it, then, like, basically, like, we know we can't win, but we're going to take away as much from you as possible while we can.
Right, because here's the thing. This goes back to Christ as the second Adam. He's reconstituted the original design of humanity, and that's huge. Right. Because, like, that means that anyone who believes on Christ is legitimately now entering into his life, and he is rescuing for himself his people, a people from out of all of humanity. He is rescuing a portion of humanity that believes on Christ and has their sins forgiven and will have a forever relationship with him. And so that is being, that they can't stop that from happening. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around that for me, doesn't feel like was fully answered. It was like, I tend to view agents of the darkness, and I tend to view them as controlling a big amount of this world. You just look at attention, and you look at some of the bigger things in the world, and it's like, well, I have a healthy respect, might be the wrong word, but like, they're cunning, right? They're smart, right? I just have a hard time believing that, even whether or not it's true, that they don't think there's a chance that they can win. I have a hard time believing that they're like, no, we know we're going to lose, but we're just going to ride this out.
Well, there
has to be a proposed path, whether it's a lie or not. Like, whether
No, I agree
Lucifer,
with that.
Maybe Lucifer knows at the end, like, yeah, this is fucked.
This is it.
But
for sure, he's fighting all the way to the end. And I would say that I agree with what you're saying, and it's true. It's true that those that lie to themselves. They're not exempt from their own lies, right? So I'm sure that there are lies that they're telling themselves about this whole thing, that, like, well, there's still a way. There's still holding out some hope that's not legitimate.
Sure. So as an example, this is something that I just made the connection to that I find interesting, is like that quest for immortality. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, all right, well, maybe that's a piece of how they think they could potentially win. It's like, all right, well, if we can never die, which is a fundamental part of the reality that God made. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's almost like, well, this could go a completely different direction, but when people talk about, use science as almost the antithesis of God or religion or whatever it is, right? Where it's like, all right, well, if we can become gods over God's reality, meaning like we can thwart the nature, the laws that God has put in place, and that's winning, right? So it's like, if we can become immortal in the flesh, then and I'm sure there are other things parallel to that would be because I don't even know these things. So I'm like, all right, I'm smart enough to where it's like, those are just my conclusions that would be my goals if I was in their shoes. So I can't imagine after a very long time, especially concerning the fallen angels, very long time, longer than humans, that they haven't thought through, like, all right, we think we could win this. Right. There's a way.
Okay, a couple biblical examples that I'll give you.
We can beat God, basically. Like, I just can't imagine you would dedicate your entire existence to beating God if you actually deep down didn't think you could beat him.
Right. No, 100%. I think that the prospects of whatever they think, however they define victory, before Christ comes and accomplishes his death on the cross for the sins of the whole world, that's a game changer. And before he does that, things are looking pretty good from their perspective, where it's like, we're kind of doing it. We're kind of living the dream. Like, we have successfully set ourselves up as gods to be worshipped. we have our kingdoms, and we don't see how we're ever going to let God in here to make it any different. So they're kind of raising a flag and declaring victory in some major battles, right? And there is a belief, incorrectly, that they can win, and you see it in Scripture. So when Jesus, before Jesus started his ministry, he was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, and in the Spirit, in the wilderness, he is tempted by Satan. And so we can get into like how fascinating it is that the Spirit led him into the wilderness, and that's then when he experienced this temptation. Kind of reminiscent of the garden.
A little bit.
A little bit, where the first Adam was told, don't eat of the tree, and then he encounters the serpent. And then here Christ is about to,
Second Adam.
before he can start his ministry, he has to be tempted of the devil. But he succeeds.
Well, right.
But let's talk about the temptation.
I was going to ask.
Why is Satan tempting him?
Right.
Scripture says that God can't be tempted with evil. Satan's tempting him anyway. Satan clearly doesn't believe that God can't be tempted with evil.
Right.
So the question is, though, like, all right, well, who are you going to believe? First of all, Satan was not able to get Christ to sin. So the evidence would suggest.
Was he tempted, though?
Well, here, now we're getting into something that's called like the peccability or impeccability of Christ.
Okay.
Was Christ able to sin and didn't, or was he unable to sin and didn't? It's a really, it's a theological question.
Dive into that. I was just curious.
But I would say that you see the perspective of the devil, and his temptation is he tempts him 3 times, and after one of the temptations, in one of the temptations, he says, "If you'll fall down and worship me, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world." And he takes Christ up on top of a high mountain, and it says that he shows him all the kingdoms of the world like in a moment. So there's this, like, cinematically in my mind, it's like this supernatural, like, time slows down and he's, showing him all the kingdoms of the world. And he's trying to make it impressive. You know what I mean? It's like, all of this can belong to you. Because, again, up until that point, mankind, there's no accomplished way of salvation for mankind. The people that were trusting in God in the Old Testament were looking forward to the promise of a Messiah that would come. So they were accepting by faith that God was going to send a Messiah to accomplish this salvation. So, but it hadn't yet been done, right? So it was still future to them. And what the devil was trying to do is make sure that it never got accomplished. So so he is tempting Christ, and what is the temptation? It's like, well, look, if I know why you're here, like, you're here because you want humanity. Well, I'll give him to you. If you will just fall down and worship me, if you'll change allegiances, if you'll come to my side, then I'll just give you what you're here for, and we can make a deal right now. And so it's interesting because it's like, on the surface, it can look like, when you just read it, it's like, okay, if you'll fall down and worship me, I'll give you the kings of the world. It's like, how did he ever think that was going to work? You're like, how did he think, oh yeah, Jesus is going to fall down and worship
I'm going to make
the
God
devil
go against himself.
What's that?
It's like, yeah, I'm going to make God go against himself.
Right. So there's this, it illustrates what the devil thinks is possible, though.
Right.
He thinks that he can get one of the members of the Trinity to turn on the other members of the Trinity and give him the worship that is only due to the Most High. So there's an incredible audacity in Satan. Like that's how much he thinks he deserves. And he's also saying how much he believes that the world, it belongs to him. Like, I own this place and I can give it to you. But this is what you have to do in return. So there's this, that's really significant because it illustrates like the truth of what you're saying. There's also an episode though where Christ, he meets a man that's possessed by devils or demons, right? And he's called the maniac of Gadara, and he lived amongst the tombs, and nobody could get near him. He would like cry and wail and cut himself with stones, and he was dangerous, and everybody knew that was from around there that you couldn't go by there because you didn't want to encounter that guy. And he was always naked, couldn't be clothed, couldn't be chained, nothing. Well, Christ encounters him, and the demons that are inside him, it's interesting what they say. They're like, they ask him a question. They're like, "Have you come to torment us before the time?" And it's an indication that they know that their eventual destiny is torment, is judgment. And so both of these things are happening simultaneously, where there are forces of darkness that, like, when they come face to face with Jesus, their response is, please don't send us, don't judge us right now. Don't send us into a place of judgment, like what you were referring to is like Tartarus.
Yeah.
Don't send us there. Like, send us into those swine over there. And so he let, and he said, "What's your name?" And he said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So there's like, and Roman legion's like 2,000 soldiers. So it's an indication that there's a large number of demonic beings present in this man. And so he sends them into a herd of swine that's like 3,000 head of pigs, right? And they immediately, the pigs charge down and dive off of a cliff into the ocean and all die. And the net result is that these pig farmers in the area, pig farming was a big deal. Obviously, 3,000 pigs. And the people that got their livelihood from those pigs got pretty upset with Jesus, because they're like, this guy, he's having this conversation, and then all our pigs he's causing trouble. We just lost 3,000 pigs because of this guy. And so they kind of drive him out of the country. You don't want him there anymore. But the point of the story in bringing it up is that those forces of darkness had great confidence that if he wanted to, he could send them to the same place that these other forces of darkness were sent right then.